Good morning, everybody. My name's Kyle Houchins. I'm a technical trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Been a while since I've done one of these. Mary's been doing a bunch of them, so you got the if you've seen one of those, you've gotten the pleasure of her many years of experience with Rhino. She's one of the people who taught me over the years, so it's always a treat to be able to learn stuff from her or Pascal or JB or any of the OG crew. Um, so if you haven't seen one of these getting started videos in the past, little different than most software demos. This is a sketch that I did last night. I have not pre-practiced this or pre-built anything. I have not taken a look at this sketch since I did it. And the idea behind these sessions and the way that I do them personally is I do a sketch either the night before, the morning of, and I put it away. And then when the session starts, I drop it onto the screen, and then we talk about what happens when somebody walks into your office and says, "Build this," and you've never seen this sketch before. So the goal is to force me to be in the same situation that you're in when somebody hands you something and you have to analyze it and figure out what it is and how you're going to build it and all that kind of stuff. And then and that usually yields some interesting results. Occasionally, we fling it right into the fan, and it all goes horribly wrong, and we have to talk about why it went wrong and how to fix it and how to get back from there. And all the other people I know who do software demos are like, "How in the world can you do that? That's like the most terrible thing ever." And I actually disagree. I think that that actually is an interesting space that is not covered by most software demos, tutorials, that kind of stuff, which is what happens when either your knowledge, the tool, or the process lets you down and you get stuck. That's where then I get to meet you on tech support because you call me and say, I tried to do this thing and it didn't work, and now what? And so I try to leave space for the now what. I try to leave space for the it's all gone horribly wrong and how do we fix that? um, Ideally, it'll go perfect, and that's great. But if it doesn't, we're going to talk about why it didn't and go from there. The other aspect of these demos is please find the chat if you haven't found it already. And the goal of this is to be an interactive session. I'm here for you. I want to answer the questions that that you have. If I do something that you've never seen before, or I do something that you're like, wait, what in the world was that? Hit the chat, ask the question. I'll stop. I'll either demo it a different way, or we'll talk about it, or we'll go off on a tangent for a little bit and try and explain it. So for those of you who are here, you get the benefit of being able to hit the pause button and say, whoa, wait a minute, what was that? And we'll try and cover that and pick up from there. So with that said, find the chat. Feel free to jump in. Don't feel like you're interrupting. This is back and forth between you and I. And if you see something that seems completely and utterly insane, call me out. We'll talk about it and we'll figure it out from there. So, all right. So with this little project, this is a little webcam thing that I designed, and the the idea behind this is we only have one view, right? So there's a lot of additional information that we're going to have to infer from this sketch and infer from our knowledge of how these kind of things work. A webcam that sits on top of a monitor has got to have a little hook on it so that it doesn't just fall off the back, right? So we've got a hook, and then it can be generally inferred that like this section down here is going to have to be backwards in space, and then there's got to be some hinging type of thing in order to be able to pinch the monitor so that it doesn't fall off and that kind of stuff, right? So there's a little bit of like assumed knowledge that we're going to have to like infer from this sketch and try and figure out, you know, how do we get there from just this thing? Then we have to kind of put it in our head and say, okay, well, this has got this flat surface on the bottom because it doesn't make any sense to have an arc on the bottom because it's got to sit on top of the monitor, but it's got a little arc on the top. Um, the kind of feel that I'm getting off the sketch is that this thing in plan view actually has kind of an arced front, which would make sense because that would give the speakers a little bit wider field and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what we're thinking. And somebody said, can you please start from zero? Yeah, so let's do that. So let's start from a blank page. We just opened Rhino. We don't see anything. And we're going to run the picture command. We're going to find our image. And it is down here. And we're just going to drag it into the space. Now, if we knew a specific scale that we were trying to work from, like we knew that this was going to be 5 inches or 3 inches or whatever, typically what I would do is I would just draw a line, right? And I would say, I'd start the line, I'd draw it, 5 units, and then I would take this and I would scale the sketch to go from here, and then using an O snap, I'd snap that to the end of the line. And then that way I would know that this dimension right there is 5 units. And so I know I'm working in the right scale to start with. And then the next thing I would probably do is I would move this from the center of that line because the sketch is not perfectly centered. And I would just center it in the workspace so that if I was working symmetrically, I knew that it would, flip from one side to the other. And okay. All right. So once we get the image in the space and we get the scale set, the next thing that I typically do, and the reason that I do this is for this case right here, is I try to move the sketch out of the modeling window. And the reason for that is I often work in shaded mode, and shaded mode occludes the sketch. And so what I'll do is I'll just grab the sketch with Gumball, I'll slide it backwards in space, and then that way I can still kind of see what I'm doing, but from the front view it still lines up and all that kind of stuff. All right. So the last thing I want to do with this is I just want to set it up on its own layer. So I'm going to come over here and double click. I'm going to change this to image, and then I'm going to right click and say change object layer. And then I'm going to change my current layer back to the default by moving the check mark up. And then I'm going to just lock this. Actually, before I lock it, I'm going to unlock that for a second. We're going to go to the materials tab over here. If you don't have a materials tab, click on any other, right click on any other tab, right click on any other tab. It'll bring up this list. And then you can just put a check mark next to the tabs that you want, materials or help or whatever. By the way, for new users out there, if you turn on the help tab, Rhino will bring up a tab that has this one, the help tab, and it lives here. This is context sensitive. So if I click a tool, watch what happens. So if I click a line tool, watch what happens. With this auto update check, it brings up the help for that command. You can also type a command up here, like let's say stretch, and it'll bring up the help for that command. But this auto update, anything that I do, like say I come up here and I say, I want to do a polar array. Once I pick that tool and the tool is active, it's actually going to bring up the help for that particular tool and with some little videos on how to use it. A lot of people don't know this about Rhino. Now, the other thing that you can do, let's say this help tab is not enabled, is if I pick a tool in Rhino and I say, let's use array again, array polar, and I hit the F1 key, it's going to open a browser window that has the help in it. So if you have 2 monitors, you can actually have the help on the second monitor. And the F1 key works for any menu pick or any tool within Rhino. So anything that you have running, just hit F1. It'll bring up the help for that, which is super, super useful. It's one of the ways that I learned Rhino was F1ing everything. So that's how it is. Help is actually helpful in Rhino, we like to say. All right, so we've got this in space. We've got it positioned where we want, but it's too dark so that if I draw over it, I can't see what I'm doing. So I'm going to click on the materials tab, and you'll notice that there's a little shader ball up here that has this webcam under assigned to it. And if you click down here, you'll notice that it's set up as a picture. It's self-illuminated, and there's a transparency slider. I'm going to crank that up a little bit, which is going to make it more transparent. And then I'm going to go back to my layers tab, and I'm going to lock it. And now I'm set up and I'm ready to roll. I can see the image. but it's not, obtrusive to the point where it's gonna, get in the way of what I'm doing. So let's think about how we're going to build this for a second. And I'm imagining that this is actually an arced surface. If we were looking at it in plan view, that it's actually going to have, a shape, something like that from top view. So let's just start with some simple line work, and let's lay this thing out in a way where we're just going to do a little bit of 2D drafting, right? So I'm going to start with the line tool. And one of the customizations I actually have in Rhino, if I hold down the shift key and right click on this tool, you'll notice that on my left mouse button, I've actually changed this to a 4-point line, which is this, and the right tooltip is just a regular, or the right click is just a regular one. So if I right click on this, I just get a regular line with 2 points. If I left click on this, I get a line and it's got 4 points. And the reason that I do that, this is just the gumball point. If I shut that off, you'll see it's 4 points. And the reason that I do that is because it gives me this opportunity to be able to do really nice edits with a straight, degree 3 line that's got 4 points that makes it easy to work with. And so that's a little customization that I've done there. And I'm going to pop this open and let you screenshot that if you want, so that you can get the code. I can also just paste this in the chat. This is the code if you want to throw that in and make your own. I find this to be super useful, which is why I made the custom. The default is the single line is actually over here and there's nothing in the right mouse, so I just swapped them. I put this one in the right hand side, which is not something that I use very often now that I've got this 4-point line. And the way to get that is if you hold down shift and right click, you'll notice it says move edit, and if I right click on that, it pops open this editor, and you can then add commands or strings of commands in here and edit things. And if you're interested in learning more about that, in the level 2 manual on the Learn page on Rhino3D.com, there's a whole section on how to customize Rhino and make macros and aliases and all sorts of stuff like that. So let's start just by laying this out. I'm going to just do this with a 4-point line, and I'm going to click from here to here, and I'm just going to go from corner to corner, and then I'm going to click the line. I'm going to drag my points, and I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to go from here to here, and this one is just a straight line, so I'm going to leave it. And then I'm also going to go from here to here. Now, I run my O snaps disabled. You'll notice that all my O snaps are selected, but I've got this disable turned on. And the reason for that is if I don't disable these, O snap kind of goes crazy, right? It's like every time you drag, it's trying to snap. It's like here, 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 here. It's like this, an over enthusiastic friend that had a few drinks. You don't want to, you're like, settle down, Chad. We don't need that. So I disable this, and the reason that I do that is now there is no O snapping going on here until I hold down the Alt key. And then I can snap from here to here. And then when I let go, it's not screaming at me the whole time. And I find that to be super useful. So I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to drag select these points and shift select these points. And then I'm just going to scale these out a little bit using that red handle. And it gives me really beautiful little arcs. Now, the cool thing about this is if I drag this and I just say edge surf, which is this guy here, it gives me a beautiful single span surface with really nicely distributed points. If I turn the points on, check that out. That is a super clean, super easy to edit, super simple, reasonable thing to be able to work with in a project like this. So let's use that, and then say if we go to the top view on this, if I grab these points and these points and then go to the perspective view, check this out. I can just add as much or as little arc to that as I want really simply, right? And let's not go crazy. Let's say it's just got like a little gentle arc to it like that. And you can see that it updates and it gives us, the basics of what we're looking for there, right? Which is the foundation of what we're going to do with this thing. Now, we don't have any information on the side of this. I have no idea what the profile of this thing looks like, so we're going to kind of find a way along the way. But from the front view, that kind of gives us what we want. Now, I'm actually going to undo that edit because we've got a little bit more drafting to do before I get into that, because I actually want this little foot to follow the arc of this up here. And so I'm going to do the same thing with this 4-point line. I'm going to O-snap this here and here. And then I'm going to do another one here and here. And then I'm going to O-snap from here to the end of that one. And then I'm going to O-snap to the end of that one. Now, one of the things that I didn't do is I didn't do this with any respect to the symmetry or the center of the page here. And so I think I need to center this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this guy, and you'll notice that Gumball is slightly off the center of the object, or of the world space. And so I'm going to use the move tool, and I'm going to grab this from the midpoint, and I'm going to just move that to 0. So I know that this is now centered, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to grab this thing, I'm going to use the move tool, and we're going to find the center, and then I'm going to move that to 0. And so now I know that this thing's all centered up, and I can actually get rid of my curves at this point. Oops, no, not those. And then I'm going to make a 4-point surface, or a edge surf out of this bottom one down here. So this guy, that one, this, and this. And so now I've got two surfaces that I can move independently, but they both have this really nice distribution if I turn the points on. That's one of the things that 4-point line gives you, is if you build with all of those 4-point curves, you're going to get perfect, degree 3, really nicely distributed surfaces, which makes really easy editing. So now let's throw a little bit of shape at this thing. And the first one I'm going to do, let's get rid of the curves. I've got a little hotkey for select curves, or you can just type cell curve. And then I'm just going to delete them because I don't need them anymore. And then what I'm going to do is turn the points on for this. I'm going to use points on over here. You can use the F10 key as well. And I'm going to grab these, shift drag these, and then I'm going to use Gumball, and I'm going to just add a little bit of arciness to this. A little shape. And I can do this in shaded view to see a little bit better what I'm doing, and kind of evaluate that as we go. Now I'm going to hit the escape key to shut the points off. I'm going to click this and then hit F10 to turn the points on for this one. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab these guys, and I'm going to pull back to here. And maybe these don't have the exact same shape. Maybe they have a slightly different curvature. Maybe it's a little flatter since the front of the monitor is flat, but we're going to give it just a little bit of shape. And then I'm going to pull the entire thing back in relationship with this. Maybe it comes forward a little bit. Maybe there's a little step in there, and we'll figure that out kind of as we're going. So now let's talk about the shape of this thing. The easy thing is just to grab the extrude dot and go like that, right? And we can get a shape out of that, but I don't feel like this is possibly the right choice there. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to start dragging. I'm going to tap Alt, and you're going to see a little plus show up next to my cursor. See that little flasher there as I tap Alt? And I'm going to make a copy of this. And the copy of that, I'm going to just drop it right there. Click it, hit F10 to turn the points on, and then I'm actually going to drag the points the opposite direction, and I'm going to get a little shape kind of like that. Maybe this needs to be a little wider, and then let's add some shape in the other direction. I'm going to pick these 2 points, and then I'm going to type in cell V, cell V, and that's going to select all of the points in that direction, which I can then pull these and get this kind of shape for the back of it, which kind of feels like maybe that's not a terrible idea. Now, when I evaluate this, I see the side and the shape that this is going to make on the side. And maybe I don't love that. So I'm going to grab these two and I'm going to pull these back. I'm going to actually click on the bunny tail. I'm going to relocate the gumball and I'm going to snap it to here. Now watch this. If I click on the bunny tail and I make sure that my gumball is set to snappy dragging, I'm going to drag this and I'm going to hold down Alt, which activates my O snaps, and I'm going to snap it right there, which is going to force all of these points to be in a straight line. So now I've got this kind of shape here, and maybe this needs to be more. So I'm going to grab these points. I'm going to pull this like that. And that gives us this kind of cool shape, right? And so now we can play with the relationships here and say, does this side and this side, what do those look like? Do they come to a sharp point? Do they have some thickness? Like what's happening in this edge? And I feel like that's probably not the right choice. So let's open that up a little bit. And the thing that I want to get across here, especially for folks who have worked in CATIA, is Rhino is a design tool. This is an art supply. This is clay. This is paint. This is, pencils and brushes. You're not a I refer to it as a CAD monkey. You're not a CAD monkey. You're not a mindless robot sitting just like copying a drawing somewhere. This process and these tools allow you to be able to explore and try things and iterate and design on the fly. That's why I didn't spend a ton of time working on what the rest of this thing looks like, because Rhino's flexible enough that I can design this in 3D, which is great because those choices are real. The stuff that the choices that I make here are actually, it's like real life. Like this is actually what it is. Whereas on a sketch, you can lie, cheat, and steal, and it ends up being something that maybe you can make it, maybe you can't. When I was in car design school, it was super easy to design a car that was completely and utterly impossible to make, right? The wheels wouldn't turn, the windows wouldn't go down, and the doors wouldn't open, and all that kind of stuff. It looks sweet on a sketch, but it doesn't really help you if you're trying to actually make the thing. So what we're trying to do here is talk about like the ways that you can actually use Rhino in a way that becomes, an extension of your creativity and not a box that you have to get in at some point to, make it work. You know what I mean? It's like this is something that should be, freeing and creative as opposed to something that feels constricting and makes you feel like the creative process is over and now you're stuck with the quote production part of it. So I'm just going to use edge surf here with two edges and close this thing up. And then I'm going to grab everything and join it. And what it's going to do, if I look at the command line, it's going to say it's going to be one closed poly surface and one open poly surface, which is fine because that's the open poly surface. So I'm not concerned about that. Now, this thing, we're going to do the exact same process here. I'm going to grab this thing and I'm going to drag, tap Alt. I'm going to make a copy. I'm going to turn on the points using F10. We're already really good at this now. And we're going to grab this and I'm going to flatten this out. And I actually want this piece to be dead flat. So that rides kind of like on the back, when it hooks over the monitor, this is the flat face that's going to kind of hook on there. And I'm going to connect these two. I'm going to run the isolate command so that we hide everything except these. And then I'm going to just use edge surf here and we're going to connect. Just like we're making this out of pieces of paper and taping it together. We're going to just add these pieces, drag select, join, and we've got our two basic shapes, right? And we can talk about how these two relationships work at a later point, but I'm not terribly worried about that right this minute. So now we have to talk about like, I'm going to block this out, and then we're going to worry about, how this all fits together and what we do with it, and all that kind of stuff. So let's look at the hinge portion of this. And so if we go to wireframe, we can decide, kind of where this needs to go. And I think that if I look at this in shaded mode, I think probably the apex of this somewhere is probably where the hinge point of the back of this thing should be, so that the camera point can, like, go up or down or whatever, give it a little bit of attitude, as opposed to being like rigidly fixed or something like that. So that gives us a hinge point kind of somewhere up in here. So let's assume that, and let's go to wireframe, and let's just draw a rectangle, and I'm gonna go kind of somewhere from like here to here, and then let's align this. If I grab this and hold down Alt, I can snap that to the center. Gumball always aligns to the bounding box center of whatever you pick. So when you pick something, unless you've moved it, the default position for Gumball is at the bounding box center of whatever object that you've chosen. And so it's super useful. Like, even if I draw this over here, I can just pick this, and I can drag it over. And if I hold down Alt, which activates my O snaps, I can snap that to the center, because we have Gumball set up for snappy dragging. That ends up working just fine. So I'm gonna put this back here, kind of where it's gonna live, and then let's go into perspective view and shaded view and just see kind of how that relationship works. And if I go to the right view, I can say, well, maybe that's too high, so I'm going to drag select these points, and I'm going to bring it down and say that's probably like, where the center point of the hinge would be. So let's kind of stick this entire thing kind of in here like that, to account for whatever thickness that we're going to make, and some kind of hinge pin or some kind of thing in there. And let's just extrude this. Let's just extrude it out to about there. And that's going to give us this open extrusion, which I can then fill by just running the cap command, and that closes that up. And we can see that it sticks out a little bit, so maybe we need to come in a little bit so that the entire thing is kind of buried in there like that. And then we need to make some space for this. So let's grab this face. I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to tap Alt, and let me expand on that a little bit. Shift Control click allows you to click an individual face of a poly surface. This is a poly surface. If I now start dragging and I tap Alt, that little plus sign shows up. I can break off a surface and make a copy of it. I'm going to pull this back and stick it here with OSnap, and then I'm going to grab the extrude dot, and I'm going to extrude it out much farther. So I've got two objects here. This one is just a cutter, and I'm going to make a cut for this using Boolean difference. I'm going to subtract from this, and I'm going to use this, and I'm going to delete the inputs. And it makes the cut for where this piece would go. Now, we can look from the right-hand view and say, okay, that did about what I wanted it to do, and the hinge pin kind of location is going to be somewhere in here. So let's kind of determine where that's going to be. So let's put the pin there, and let's bring it down to something like that. And then let's copy paste this. We're going to start dragging on a scale handle and hold down Shift, and we're going to make that a larger object, and we're going to snap it to the end of that. And then that way, what I can do is I can isolate those two objects. I can split this curve in half from the center. And then, if the world is a kind and just place, we can wire cut this, and we can use this in the C-plane normal, and we are going to cut away that part. And that gives us that nice round edge. We'll bring this back. Let's go out here, and let's move this all the way out here, and then use the extrude dot and make a really long pin. And then what we'll do is we'll Boolean subtract from that as well. And we might be getting a little farther down into the details than we need to right at this particular moment, but it is what it is. And then let's move this curve back here, extrude dot again. Notice I'm not worrying too much about like whether this thing is centered or not, because I can always just kind of wing it around in space and then come back and snap this to the midpoint and know that it's centered at a later date, right? So let's grab this thing and cap it. And so now we've got our neck, we've got our hinge, and so all that stuff is set up. So let's go, and because this is probably, the easier part to make than the rest of it, let's go ahead and make the rest of it. So at this point, I'm going to use a polyline, and I'm going to draw half of this curve like this, and then I'm going to mirror it, join it, and then I'm going to use gumball to make sure that it's centered. And that keeps you from having to like constantly go back and coordinate things, right? And be like, we'll start at 0 and then blah, 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 blah. It's like you can just kind of like, wee, and make stuff, and then use gumball to like center it all back up. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just drop a point at 0, and then that way I've got something easy to snap to, and I don't even have to use grid snap, which I find super annoying. I'm going to mute for just a second, clear my throat. Hang on. All right. What commands are you using to mirror? It's actually the mirror command. And it is just called mirror. And it lives down here. It is, I never actually used the command or use the icon. I always just grab it from here. Where is it? It's this one right here, mirror. Okay. There's also, I have an alias set up actually for mirror X and mirror Y, which is really cool because I can permit me to riff for a second. So if I grab this and I draw a curve here and I use my hotkey for mirror X, it goes across like that. And then if I click these and then I use my hotkey for mirror Y, I can do that kind of stuff. And those are super easy to set up if you come in here, tools, options, aliases. And for those of you who are on a Mac, it's if you're on Ventura, it's settings, aliases. If you're on before Ventura, it's preferences, settings, aliases, or preferences, aliases. And what you can do is you can set up these little keys and add these little bits of code. Everything in Rhino, the command line, we get people who are new to Rhino who are always like, the command line's dumb. Why do you use the command line? Well, the command line, what you don't understand, that's actually programming language. And so each command that you enter is a command that is actually like a little piece of code. And the cool thing about it is you can string commands together to do stuff. Like for instance here, this is for hiding meshes. So if I pick a mesh, if I pick something and then say, run this command, it's going to select the mesh, it's going to invert the selection, and then it's going to hide everything else, leaving me with just the mesh. And so this actually is a tiny little computer program, right? We told it, put these 3 commands together to do this thing and assign it to a button. So that's why the command line is there, and that's why it's super useful. And when you start getting to the point where you want to customize Rhino, you'll start paying attention to what, when you run a command, it says command options. Well, that's actually the little piece of code that calls that particular function in Rhino. When you get better at it, you can start stringing those things together, and there's actually a little macro editor up here where you can actually string a bunch of commands together and test it to see whether it works. So you can actually write your own little functions and then assign them to buttons, which now Rhino starts to really, really, really fly. So, so that's my spiel on that. So let's get back to this. This is, we want this to have a little bit of a gap. So I'm going to offset this, which lives down here. And we're going to take this and let's offset it like, I don't know, 0.01 or something like that, just something small. And you can see that it clipped, it kind of did this, this self intersection here because I had trim set to no. I'm going to set trim to yes. And then what it's going to do is it's going to actually get rid of that little self intersection and give me this closed object. And so I'm going to use that as a wire cutter, and I can either use it as a wire cut or I can just extrude that, cap it, which basically is exactly what wire cut does, and then do a Boolean difference, which is going to cut that into two pieces, and I can get rid of that curve now. And so now I need to decide kind of where that hinge point's going to be, and I'm going to just kind of drop it right in the center between, somewhere in there. And so if we just say, let's find the midpoint, drag straight up, and then let's find kind of the center of that, and I'm going to just say that's kind of going to be the hinge. And so if we grab this, pull it out, and I'm going to use an extrude dot, and then I'm going to just cap this so it's solid. V8, one of the things that's cool about V8 is actually there's two extrude dots. So if you want a closed one versus an open one, there's a closed dot versus an open dot, which is nice. And I'm going to subtract this, not going to delete the inputs from that, and then I'm going to just use this as the pin, like that. And then we need to make a little clearance for these, and so I need to kind of round this one and round that one. So let's do it a little bit differently. Let's do it with a fillet, and I'm going to do these two here like that, and let's preview it, and we can see that that's way too big, so we're going to set all, and we can see that it's still way too big because it's crossing over itself. And now we can see that the part is there. I might go a little bit bigger. Let's go like 0.085. And this allows you to be able to sneak up on it a little, like that, and get, in this case, we could build the full round, but I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal here and go take the easy road. So let's do that, and then let's do the same thing here. And we knew that it's about, 0.087, so we'll go ahead and do the same thing. And it's going to remember the last value we put in. So we know that works. So we'll go from there. So that way we've got our little hinge stuff set up so that that'll work. Now we could get fussy and we could build, we could build this to follow so that those gaps are tighter and stuff like that, but we'll save that for the demo. That's not an hour. When is V8 release? V8 release, the only official thing that I can say is it's in progress. You can get the work in progress cut from our website right now if you want to try it. I would encourage you to do so. And the official McNeil answer for when is it going to be released is when it's ready. We're a private company. We don't have stockholders. We don't have stockholders telling us what to do, when to do it. And so we work on something and we test it in public beta until it's ready. And when you tell us it's ready, then it's ready. And so you can find it if we go to the download page. It's the Serengeti build right here. You're welcome to grab it. If you're a Rhino 7 license key holder, you can grab that. Give it a try today. We would appreciate it if you did. All right, so we've got the main pieces, right? This we know if we set our gumball up here to the center point of this pin, then we can, we know that this is going to rotate the way that we want it to rotate. We know that this one is set up if we change the gumball to the center of this one. We know that this one will rotate the way that we want it to rotate. And so we can do, we know that that's going to kind of do what we need to do. Whether we need a third articulating piece down here or not, we'll have to print one and test it and see whether it works, The video is going to be posted on our YouTube page, which is Rhinoceros 3D. And it's also going to be up on Vimeo. So you'll be able to get it from one of those two platforms. All of our YouTube stuff is just here. Rhinoceros 3D. All of these things are recorded throughout the years. All right, let's talk about breaking up the camera. So I'm going to isolate this, and let's just go back to our original piece here. And I'm actually going to go back one step further. I'm actually going to extract this face. I'm not going to copy it, and then I'm going to isolate that, because what we're going to do is do a little bit more drafting just to get the rest of the details for this part. And so it's a relatively kind of a, you know, a simple thing here. So I'm going to just trace this out, and then I'm going to drag this up and copy it, and then I'm going to grab these 2 points and pull it down, because there's no reason to do more work than we need, and then maybe scale this out just a hair. And looks like that arc is off just a hair. Let's fix that. Still the inside points need to come down a little bit. I'm going to use nudge, which is my arrow keys. That looks a little better. And then let's connect the edges here. And I'm going to just mirror this over. Oops. From here, join those, and then we'll call that good, right? So that'll be the lens. We'll split that off and inset it a little bit. And then let's draw this grill detail. And this grill detail has a couple of separate parts, right? There is the exterior shape here. Then this interior shape dives in a little bit. So there's this gap that needs to get filled. And then there's these little speaker grill details. And then there's like actually this third part over it, which we're going to just use as a material and assign a, you know, we'll assign a material to it so that it has like a mesh grill or something. So let's draw that out. And again, I'm going to do that with straight lines. I'm going to overbuild this a little bit. So I'm going to actually draw it from off the part, and we'll pull that kind of something like that. And we kind of want to make it semi-flow with the rest of the part. So that kind of thing going on there. And then probably want this one to be fairly straight. Drawing on that's not very good. So I'm going to just go to there. And then we'll draw one more here. Turn those points on. And we'll pull this till it feels like it works with this. That probably needs to come some more. So I'm going to nudge that using my arrow keys. Something like that. It's funny when you put like actual lines sometimes over your sketch lines, you're like, whoa, what in the world? So I actually like this relationship a lot better than how it was drawn. So I'm gonna go with that. So let's take this and let's mirror this over so that we've got both sides. We could always just build one side, cut the thing in half, and then split it, but let's just make it easy. And then let's split this surface using the split tool. And we're going to use all these curves, and we're going to split this up. So I've got a surface here, a surface here, and a surface here. And so now I've got some decisions to make. And in this case, what I'm going to do, let's focus on the center section here first. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give myself a little lens here, right? So I'm going to extrude this in a little bit, and that's going to give me the glass piece. But what I also need, if I hide this, is I need the surface that's going to make up the camera lens in here. So let's grab Shift Control click all of these curves, and then let's extrude that back a little bit. And I'm going to extrude it back quite a ways because I'm going to just overbuild that because I want it to be flat. And then let's say that the camera actually is flat. So let's do that. and pull this up. And we'll look at it and see if it looks dumb, we'll change it. Wouldn't be the first time I designed something that looked dumb and had to be changed. That's just kind of what you deal with. So, all right, so we've got this little thing, and then I'm gonna isolate that, and let's focus on drawing the camera bits. And so it looks like we've got a step in here, and then a step and a step and a step and a step, and then another step and then another step, a bunch of other stuff in here, right? So let's just start from the midpoint, and let's go find this midpoint, and then if we come over here, we can find where that intersection is, and then we'll say that's the first step, and then I'm just going to copy paste, and I'm going to shift drag, and then I'm going to copy paste, and I'm going to shift drag, copy paste, and I'm sure there's like, you know, some fancy way to do this and make it like have, you know, some kind of harmonic cohesive design structure that the IDSA would think was fantastic, but I don't really care about that right now. So not that I don't care about the IDSA, they're a bunch of good people, but we're trying to get someplace quick. All right, so I'm gonna copy paste again, and then maybe one more, and then I'll say that's the final location for our camera, right? So then we're going to grab this surface, we're going to split with all of this stuff, and then the fun begins. So I'm going to grab my curves, I'm going to just delete them because I don't need them anymore. And then what I can do is I can start playing with this. And before I do this, I'm actually going to kill my history because what I don't want is something that I've drawn before to screw up something, you know, later. And so I'm gonna grab this, and I'm gonna, first of all, I'm just gonna start distributing this stuff in space. And so I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna alt click these, and then I'm gonna drag this back a little bit. And again, you know, you could measure this, you could do, but I'm kind of an eyeball guy. I kind of, especially for early concept stuff, I tend to kind of just yeet stuff out in space and see how it works and see what it feels like and see what it prints like, and then, you know, subsequent models, because there's no such thing as just one and done in this business. There just isn't. And so I tend to kind of just go with what feels right and then, you know, fix it later. So, and let's pull this one forward, and let's pull that one back, and let's pull these two back like that. And then let's say that this one is actually a sphere, so let's leave it like that. And so now all we need to do is come in here and just stitch this together, right? We can just clickety 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 and just put it all back together. And these are not open curves, so I can't use that. They're closed curves, so I have to use loft. And I can also use blend curve set to position, which is one of my favorite tricks because it chains curves, whereas loft doesn't. And so let's grab all of these over here. Let's do this. Watch this. Here, let's delete that. And then let's grab all of this. And let's mirror that. That way we don't have to do it twice. Some say lazy. I say efficient. Join it up. And then let's check it to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And we did miss something here. So let's fix that. That's the show edges command, by the way, and that lives down here. And that is something, if you don't have it in your pop-up, put it in your pop-up. And then pop-up is your middle mouse button. And the way that you add things to a pop-up, there's actually a video on how to do that if you go on our YouTube. But the way that you add things to a pop-up is hit the middle mouse button, grab it by the neck here and shake it, and so that it docks, and then hold down the control key and drag stuff to your pop-up. So if you want something there, hold down control, drag it up here, and you can add a copy of it to there. If you want to get rid of it, hold down move, drag it out, and that'll drag it out. Now, don't move stuff. Don't shift drag, because if you move it, you'll pull it out of this toolbar and it'll be gone into here. Make sure that you're using control drag, which is copy. Okay, so definitely set up your pop-ups. I find that to be super useful. All right, so let's fix this little doiget down here that doesn't work, and let's join it up. And then we can see that the only parts that are open are the things that are supposed to be open, right? The only thing that's naked edges down here is the stuff that's supposed to be naked edges. Now let's add our camera lens, and I'm going to do that with a sphere. And we're going to just O-snap to the center, and then O-snap to the edge. And then we're going to trim, and then we can join. And that's our little iris assembly. And if we go into rendered view and we were to assign a transparent plastic to that, I like transparent plastic over glass because glass has some IOR stuff that becomes a little bit messy sometimes. We add some darkness to that, and then I would do the same thing to this guy, and we'll make it super reflective and glossy and clear and all that kind of stuff, right? So then we've got our lens there, and that looks kind of camera-licious, right? So let's deal with this guy now. So I'm going to grab these two pieces, and check this out. I'm going to grab this, and because the edge of this is flat, right? If I grab this edge, you can see that there's no green handle, which means this is a flat edge. I can do this, which is to grab this surface. And let's see, let's think about this for a second. I want to copy this because I actually want to keep this surface as a potential for a grill. So let's do that. Let's make a speaker grill layer, and let's just copy an object to that layer, and then let's hide it so that we've got that. So we banked that for later. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to relocate my gumball. And I actually have a hotkey set up for this, but we can do that. And if I just scale this, look what happens. That just starts to peel away. But it peels away at the base point, which is kind of what I wanted it to do, right? Like that. And then that gives us our split, right? So now we can just go ahead and stitch this thing back together. And that gives us that. So let's mirror that. Let's join it all up. And then let's make our little spear details. And those, I think I'm not going to get super fancy with those. Let's just draw them out like that. And then it looks like they want to have a little bit of a curvature bias in here. So I'm going to pull those in like that. And that gives us that little kind of icicle shape. And let's do something like that. And let's close them up. And I'm going to just make a planar surface out of that. And I'm going to do that over here. Somebody got all inflamed on YouTube because I was using too many hotkeys, so I'll try not to do that. All right, so let's snap this kind of to there. And then let's turn the points on because obviously it's not set up in a good way. And you can see that the points on this are not necessarily conducive for bending this thing, right? So let's change its degree from degree 1 And the command is change degree. I have a hotkey set up for that. I just told you I wasn't going to use hotkeys, and then I used hotkeys. See how our relationship is developed? So let's switch this to 3 and 3, and then that gives us the points we need to actually do the bend. And let's actually go to the top view, and let's actually use the bend command. And I'm bending the points, not the object, because what happens if I bend the points and not the object is, if I bend the object, it's going to rebuild. And let's actually rotate this into space just a little bit better, because right now it's way kind of crazy like that. And then let's bend the points. Let's spell bend right. The bended command doesn't get you much. You have to use actually. What happens when you take somebody from art school and make them spell? All right, so that gives us our little sphere. And I'm going to tuck it kind of here, and then I'm just going to extrude it like that. And then let's make a copy of it. Kind of something like that. And let's take a peek and see if we like it. And I left a little space in there in case, if we did want to build a speaker grill, that it doesn't interfere. And we can decide, like, do we like that with it sticking out? Do we want it to fade out? Like, what do we want to do? I think for this purpose of this demo, we're just gonna roll with it. So I'm gonna Boolean this together. Now, one thing I need to understand before I Boolean this together is I need to know what direction, because this is not a closed poly surface, I need to know which direction the surface is going. So I'm going to click the direction tool, and you can notice that this is facing out, right? The arrow is facing towards me, which is what I want. If it was facing the other direction, I may get an unpredictable result when I do this. If it was facing the other direction, and if you run across this, the simple fix is just simply to flip the surface. So if I ended up with that, that's not what I wanted, right? It's because the surface is facing the wrong direction. So just flip it and then do your Boolean again, and you'll get the right result. Okay, so because I like that, I'm gonna undo, I'm gonna mirror those. And let's join them up with Boolean. And that gives us our little detail. And the speaker grill, I'm going to add this to here. So our speaker grills are there. And so let's do that. Let's bring these back. Let's say select object. And let's isolate. And let's turn these into little speaker grills. And I'm going to do that just by extruding them ever so teeny tinily, like that. And then we can bring everything back. And if we go to rendered mode, let's assign a material to those. Let's do a plastic, but let's add, actually, let's do that as a custom because we want to mess with it. So let's do that as a custom. And then as far as the color is concerned, let's make it black. And then as far as a transparency map, let's grab a texture. Not gonna let me map that, huh? Assign a texture. Ah, there we go. Down here in the transparency channel. Duh. Not bad for my first time in Rhino. Let's choose from a texture. Let's use, I don't know, let's use something like a dots texture. And then let's mess with the dots texture a little bit. And let's change our repeats to like, I don't know, 50. And that should give us some kind of speaker grillish kind of thing. And it looks like it's going backwards, so let's change that. The colors up here, let's swap the colors, and then that's going to give us transparent bits through there. And if we change this from black to gray, the whole thing should start getting more transparent. And I really like that. Let's change that. Let's just make it a let's go more. Actually, let's do less. Play with it until we find something that we like. Eh, I don't love that. Let's get rid of the texture. Let's remove it. Let's just make it a simple transparency. Something like that. All right, let's add some black plastic here. And let's add some more black plastic back here because as designers, we're going to be super creative. Ooh, actually, that's our lens color. Sorry, we need to make a new one. Super creative for new products. What color is it? It's black. But the shades of black are what's important. All right, so that's our basic thing. And let's join all of this back up so that this is now a closed poly surface. Now it says it's an open poly surface, so we need to figure out where. The camera part. Let's hide our lens. There we go. Let's get all of this stuff. Really important to pay attention to the command line to make sure that you get that closed poly surface that you were looking for. And let's deal with this little guy and try and figure out like how he works. So let's isolate that. How are we doing? We're at an hour. That's about. We're rounding the bend here. So if you're pressed for time, we're getting close to being done. And let's draw our cut in here. And I'm going to do this. Again, I'm going to draw this in half. I'm going to mirror it, join, and then I'm going to snap that to the center line. And then I'm going to just scale it out so that it matches what I want. I'm going to wire cut that. And I want to invert and get rid of that. So the highlighted part of wire cut is what's going to get deleted. And I don't really love like this little transition here. So let's try and figure out how we're going to manage that. And I think what I want to do is I think I'd like to have like a little blend going through there. And so I think what I want to do is I kind of want to blend from this edge to something kind of down in here. So let's extract this surface and isolate. I do this a lot just because it's really easy to keep track of what's going on. And then I'm going to split the edge of this surface. And this is a tool that not a lot of people know about or use, and it lives way down here. It's called split and merge edge. I actually have it in my pop-up because I use it all the time. And what it allows you to do is to break up an edge into segments that you can then work with. And so now what happens, if I show edges on this, you'll actually see this is a selectable edge. I can Control-Shift-Click that, which is great because that means that I can then use this to do stuff, right? And the thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to trim this surface down here like this to build a gap. And we're doing that. You have to build a gap in order to make a blend, because what we're going to do now is run blend surf from here to here. And the cool thing is we don't need curvature. That's a lot. What it does is it gives us the ability to be able to now make this blend. And if I go from the front view, you can see that it's kind of skewed. I don't really want it that way. So I'm going to hit Alt and I'm going to click on one of these points, and then I'm going to snap it to there. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to snap it kind of up here. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I want to aim it in this direction. And then I'm going to use my sliders to adjust kind of how that blend goes. I'm going to go back to perspective view so I can see what it's doing. I want this one to be a little higher. So I'm going to drag that up a little bit. I'm going to drag that up. And you can see that it then blends right off that surface. And I like that. So I'm going to keep it. And I'm just going to make this go over there. And then if I'm living right, it looks like something's off. Looks like my center point, looks like the whole model is slightly skewed off the center. So what I'm going to do is mirror this off of this midpoint. There we go. Tell you what, let's make life easy. No reason to fight this. Let's just split this in half. Oops. See how that updated? That's a function of history misbehaving. So I'm going to kill history first, and the command is history purge. Then I'm going to trim this, and then we will mirror this around there. That way it all behaves, does what it needs to do. And the underlying structure is going to be wrong. So let's do this. Let's get one side that works well. And let's trim that entire side off. And then let's fix Control-Shift-Click and delete those. And we're going to join this up. And then I'm going to two-rail sweep this because it's got two edges here. And then same thing over here. I'm going to chain it. Edge Surf doesn't allow you to do this, which is why this is a nice tool. Join that up. And then let's mirror this whole thing. And we can argue about whether or not that's enough engagement for the part or not. I don't really care. That's fine. We'll print one and see what it looks like. Let's Boolean those two parts together. And it looks like the Boolean failed. And the reason for that is probably because we've got coplanar parts. And so the fix for that would be to extract this bottom surface, come out here, and let's use this object to trim. And then let's join those two pieces. And then we'll bring the whole thing back, join the whole thing up. Now, it says it's an open poly surface, so now we got to figure out why. Oh, actually, we know why, because it's got big giant holes in it. That's why. That would be the first clue, are the big giant holes. So let's trim this all back up. All right, so now we are, let's check this with show edges. And it looks like we've got some stuff that's not joined up. So let's see if it's just we missed a surface or we deleted something that didn't need to get deleted. So let's try cap first. And it looks like it got the bottom one, so that's fine. This one over here looks like there was a little mirror problem. So I think what we're going to do is let's get this fixed. And this is a perfect opportunity for this split edge. If I come over here and I split at these points, then I can use this edge surf and I can knit this all back together. These edges down here might misbehave. Let's see. If they do, we'll deal with them. And in that case, they didn't. So we've got one side that's good and one side that's not good. We've got a little mess down here, and it looks like that is a mess. So let's fix that because I don't like that at all. So let's delete this piece. Let's delete this back here. Tell you what, let's split it. We're going to be clever here. Let's split this here. And let's delete just that part of it. And let's move this back from the edge a little bit because it seems like that is making a mess. So let's do that, and then let's make another piece that comes in a little bit. Let's trim this back here like that. I think that's probably a better choice for where that thing should be. And then looks like this edge got messy, so let's fix it. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to merge edge. And it looks like that edge got a little bit messy right there. So let's untrim it. And then let's merge that edge. So that edge cleaned back up. Now, we lost our trim, which is fine. We can always get it back. But it looks like the messy part now is on the bottom, so let's fix that. This is a common problem when you're kind of hacking at something. And I tend not to get terribly upset about it because it's fairly easy to work around. Let's just add that, and let's go off of this outer edge out here. And once we've got a cleanly defined region, then we'll just work around that. So now our edge is cleaned up now. And we can start putting this back together. And once we get something that we like, we just mirror it all back up. It's fine. Don't need to get too bent out of shape. I get people calling me all the time like, oh my God, my model is a mess. I'm like, it's not really. You just got to take it apart and put it back together. All right, so let's do this. Let's run a sweep one chained along this edge using this and this as a gen. And I don't love that. So let's draw a line and we'll do a 2-rail sweep like that. Or we can even do that if the edge is a little messy, which it looks like it might be. Actually, let's do this. And let's do a sweep one, but let's do it along that edge like that. And then, actually, let's do a sweep two. We've got 2 rails, might as well use them, right? One, like that. And then it doesn't go far enough to do what we need it to do, so we'll just extend it. That. And then, you know what? Let's use that as a proxy surface for now. Watch this. Here, we're going to be clever. So we're going to use this surface edge. We're going to chain that edge. We're going to go from that surface edge to that surface edge, and we're going to get it. Now we've got our back, right? So now I'm going to delete this, and then we'll do a 2-rail sweep here. And that'll put us all back together. Should. Let's see. Let's join everything. Looks like we've still got an open edge here. And it might be because there is still something weird going on here. That's interesting. Let's see what it is. It looks like something about that surface is misbehaving. So let's get rid of it once. All right, that looks a little cleaner, he said. No, looks like we've still got a little mess down here. All right, so something is misbehaving. So let's see if we can figure out which one is misbehaving first. So let's do a 2-rail sweep from here. And I'm going to extend this. We're just going to overbuild it. That's a really easy way to make sure that everything works. And then I'm going to split this edge to match. And then I'm going to do a sweep one. And I'm going to extend this. And then we've got a nice intersection there, right? And then let's, oh, looks like that's missing by a mile. That's probably what the problem is right there. See that? All right, change tactics. See, when you build something you've never built, you get problems you've never run into before. So let's do a 2-rail sweep and do that. Helps if I do the 2-rail. First one, second one. There we go. Now let's extend this. And so that gives us a precise intersection, so we can trim both of these. And if we join this up now, that should join cleanly up there, which it does. So now we just have to do a 4-sided and edge surf down here. Whew, that was a long way to go for that. But there we are. So now we know we've got this side that we like. So let's just go with it, and let's join everything up and then figure out what needs to get mirrored. And we'll mirror the whole thing. And I want to hide these guys. And it looks like we need to retrim that surface. So let's do that. And I'm going to trim, I'm going to use the CRV command. So if I hit CRV, it allows me to pick surface curves instead of having to draw curves. Helps if you pick the right curves. I always like to say I screw things up so you don't have to. Come on now. All right. Getting one side to behave, so let's just go with that. I'm going to split this right down the middle. I'm going to use the center of the camera. I'm going to trim off this whole side. There you go. Now we're closed. No naked edges, no non-manifold edges. It's more than one way to burn a village. All right, and anything else that's left over? Looks like I've got some leftover pieces here. Let's get rid of those. And get rid of our curves. So we don't need those. And then let's go into rendered mode. And we can see our little camera lens there, and then our speaker grills. We're going to turn those back on. And let's find something. Let's grab a image, and let's do, I'm just going to grab something really quick from an image bank here. And let's save that as desktop. And it says it's a PNG. I'm just going to save it as a JPEG. And then like in our speaker grill material, which I think is this one. Yes. Let's add a custom color here. And let's do there we go. And you can see that texture now gets mapped on, and then I've got some transparency on, so we're going to crank that down. There we go. So that's our little grill texture. And we can hide our image. And then maybe we want to pose this a little bit. I'm going to rotate from here. And let's use another cool feature. I'm going to change this to black because I can't stand when I see candy colors in the modeling window. There's a function called snapshots, which are really cool because it allows you to save the model in different states. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to snapshot it in this position, and we're going to call this, we'll just call this default. And we're going to save essentially everything in here. And say, okay. And then what we can do now is I can grab this, and we can rotate that out like that. And we'll do another snapshot. And we'll call this rotate 1. No, can't have spaces in it. Can't use a Rhino command name for something. And then we're going to do another one. Like this. And we'll call this rotate 2. And then what we can do is the default, it's going to take us here, rotate 1, it's going to take us there, rotate 2, it's going to take us there. It's odd that it broke it apart like that. But then we can go to the perspective view and we can see those different states. So because we saved the camera view, it's going to snap us back to here, but that's not really a big deal. If we wanted it to be in perspective, we would do our rotation and then have put it back into perspective and then save the snapshot. But so that gives us our pose. And then at any time, if we, that would be what we would use for rendering. And then at any time, if we needed to go back, we could go back to the default. So that's snapshots. We actually use snapshots to do presentations, which ends up being pretty cool. So let's just throw a quick render on this and see what happens. Let's just throw a ray trace on this and see what happens. So now we can start refining materials and say, well, is this too shiny? Is this not shiny enough? All that kind of stuff. And so this plastic, that one we can say needs to be much more transparent. And probably not black. And we can see through it. So that gives us our lens. And then if we wanted to add decals or anything else like that, or fillets or anything to help clean it up. But that gets us essentially to where we are now, where we could start doing the refining. All the parts on this are watertight, which means if we run cell open polysurf, nothing should light up. Cell surf, there shouldn't be any open surfaces in there. And if we grab everything and run the what command, it should say closed, 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 right? Everything in here should be closed. And if that's the case, then that means that you could mesh any one of these parts and send them through a printer and they would print just fine. Okay. Any questions on any of that? Now, one of the things that we can say about this rendering is it looks really harsh because there's no fillets on it. And so if I grab this entire thing and I come over here under the properties, there's actually a thing called edge softening. And if I come in here and I soften this like 0.05 and I turn this on, some of them are not going to soften because it's probably too big. But now if I run this and I run, actually that might be way too big. So let's make that smaller. Let's do it 0.01. Now if I run this ray trace, what it's going to do is it's actually going to fillet the render mesh. And maybe we need to go a little bit bigger. And what you start to see on the edges is you start to get some softening effects happening on the edges of things where you don't have to actually go in and fillet stuff. You can see in here how it's getting a fillet on that. And I probably don't want to do a blanket fillet. I probably would want to go in and do this, individually, but you can see that we're starting to get some fillet on the lens in here, which gives us that break. Looks like this piece probably is not softening because there's some parts in here where 0.04 doesn't fit. So I'd need to mess around and try and figure out like which would work, what fillet would work for that and stuff like that. So we can come in here and now start to see that there's a little bit of softening happening. Looks like that one's still complaining. Let's force it. And you can see when you force it, it's found some areas in here where it doesn't like that. So all right, so we can let that res up. I'm going to turn on a denoiser. Oh, it doesn't look like I have a denoiser loaded in here. And just going to res up and finish up. So that would give you what you would need. How do you make these shapes have a thickness? Right now they are surfaces. Actually, they're all actually closed watertight parts. If you wanted to shell it, I guess what you're looking for, especially if you were going through a printer, there's a great video on shrink wrap. You can do it manually. You can shell something manually, but it's really painful. In version 8, there is a tool called shrink wrap, and it allows you to be able, I'm going to stick the link to the video in the chat. But basically what it allows you to do is to shrink wrap a part and then create an offset of it. And then you can do a mesh boolean between those two parts and get a shelled part if you wanted to go to a printer. But right now, if we were to, say for instance, if we were to go to shaded mode and I was to run a clipping plane through this, you can see that the parts are actually solid. So this actually would be considered a solid. If you were to print this, this is exactly how it would print. That would be your slicer, what your slicer would see. Now, if you wanted to shell this, that's a different story. Then you'd look at shrink wrap. But yeah, you can print this as it sits. Right now, there's nothing open. So what I would do is I'd pull this apart, and I would print each one of these pieces as a, I'd print each one of these pieces individually. Even the speaker grills, actually, we added thickness to them, so those actually are a solid part. So hour and a half with chatting and some screwing around and one minor hiccup that we had to fix with that surface. You've got something that you could throw through a printer and test, which is, super reasonable, right? It's feasible that you could take this, throw it through a printer, and by the time you got back from lunch, have something that you might be able to throw on top of a monitor and see whether it works. See how it feels. So that's super cool to me. Or even better, build 4 or 5 of these, in a day, send them all through the printer overnight, and then have them sitting on your desk when you come in the morning. That's even better. Do all sorts of variations from this. All right, any questions? One cool thing about snapshots is I pulled this thing apart. It'll all go back where I put it. So even if you mess something up, it'll remember all of that. So even if I screw all this stuff up, I can take this stuff and throw it around in space. Because I had a snapshot of where all this stuff went, I can do this and it'll go back together. So if you're doing say for instance, you're doing exploded views for instruction manuals, snapshots are awesome. So you can say this part goes here and this part goes here and these parts go out here like that and this thing goes back here like that and then this thing goes out here like this, and you're trying to do an assembly manual or something like that, and you throw it into pen. There's your instruction manuals right there. There's your exploded views for your instruction manuals. Any packaging folks out there? This has just made your life a lot easier. And then when you're done, you just boop, it goes right back together. Cool, huh? All right. Any other questions? Anything else? If not, I'll let you go. I think that's all I got for you today. Thanks for sticking in it. Um, if there's no other questions, I'll let you get on your way. My name's Kyle Houchins. This is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye.